understand from you, Nitin ji, how what's the difference between, or in your perspective over the years, I would like you to highlight the difference between a donation and a sponsorship. How whether they can be equally weighed in. What Whenever you talk to your networks, your friends and family in your networks, what do you advocate more for? Is it a donation or is it a sponsorship? What has more impact, or is it both? How do we build our advocacy message when we move forward?
So, yeah, I think your previous discussion, just before you asked me the question, I guess that relates to this question very well in terms of perspective about India's changing. Yes, it is changing. And therefore, recent years I've seen, and I don't want to talk politics, but what I'm saying is last 10 years or 8 years or so, has become a very powerful nation in terms of, at least as a perception overseas. And therefore people do think why you need money, because there are many countries in the world
Right.
who can be helped. So it's a valid point and it's a valid perception, and I can see that in Asia, I can see that here in Australia, I used to see that in Middle East. What has been my message is, we don't need donations. We really don't need donation because we are changing lives. We need sponsorship. You take one child, because that's something you can easily design, and that sponsorship will create an individual who can take a good education and get into the college. And you can see a journey of an individual who generally comes as a very shy individual and becomes a very confident human being after getting that education and getting into the bigger cities to study for further studies. So my message has been always on sponsorships, not donations, because we don't need donations. People's perception about donations, and this is, I mean, Australia is huge in NGO market. And when I say use market, because Australia's NGO industry is in billions of dollars. And there are NGOs who support countries in Africa, in Asia, and also there are NGOs who run to support Australian initiatives. So donations is not the right term, I would say, for CASP, which I never promoted as donations. I said you are changing lives. With your money, we are changing lives. And because of CASP's communication, or people who are working on ground, the progress report which you developed, I actually recently shown that progress report to one of my um, friend who is sort of working in education sector. And I said, look, this is what we do. We get a child, CASP gives me their progress report once a year, and this is how you see a progress. I mean, if you really put a graph to that child, you can see how that child is growing on holistic level, not just academic, but holistic level. So what I'm saying is, the sponsorship, we are collecting sponsorships to change lives. That was my message, and that really worked, because most of the people I meet, I have got some connections to India, have got huge admiration for the education they received at the time. And I'm 53 this year, so most of our generation who left India in mid 90s had that consistent education which we can relate, whether be it as engineering, be it as medicine, be it as commerce, whichever discipline. And all there is one common theme, because we have kids who go to very expensive schools, not only here but everywhere, even in India. I've got friends whose kids are in very, very elite schools, but all of us who were sort of grown up in an education system where 10 rupees was a monthly fee for a primary education, and that education has provided us this platform to launch into the world where India was just opened up in mid 90s. Everyone, when I use word sponsorship and education to give back, um, everyone is convinced, and that's where I feel um, the big difference is not only just getting those sponsorship but also maintaining those students.
Right.
Because if the students are, how the students will be maintained? By your ground staff, and they're doing phenomenal job. So the whole loop is completed because of a really good ground staff who is working with those students. I can show the same progress report of that student for 7 years to a sponsor, and that sponsor is convinced. And generally what happens is the sponsor himself or herself gives me that feedback saying, look Nitin, this student is doing really well. I don't want to discontinue them. I know we stop at grade 12, but I don't want to discontinue that student. Let's go ahead through CASP to sponsor their college with whatever education program they got. So it's it's a sponsorship message I have always given, and that has worked. And giving back, I would say, is minimum we can do for Indian education. What we have received in mid 80s
Right.
is it's a no brainer for most of us, because we didn't spend, or India was kind enough, Indian education system was kind enough to provide us the best of the West education at a fraction of price. If you look at the education around the world, including India, it's gone up significantly, but the rural education in public schooling is still unbeatable in terms of its cost in India, even today. So yeah, that's the answer to your question about how I convey the message.